Imagine being trapped in a freezing, tiny cell, the air thick with the stench of fear. Screams pierce the silence, bouncing off the stone walls. Heavy boots echo closer, and your heart races. Another prisoner is about to be dragged away, gone forever. This wasn't a horror movie. This was Unit 731, a secret Japanese lab in World War II where human lives meant nothing, treated worse than lab rats. It's a place where the worst nightmares came true, and the truth was buried for decades. Record shows that this is one of history's ugliest secrets, a story so brutal it'll shake you to your core. It's not easy to watch, honestly, but these are facts we can't ignore. Unit 731, hidden in northern China, carried out experiments that made Nazi crimes look tame. Thousands of people, men, women, kids from China, Korea, Russia, and even Allied soldiers faced horrors we can barely imagine. How could anyone do this to another human? And why was it kept quiet for so long? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the unspeakable things Unit 731 did to its victims. But before we step into that darkness, let's figure out why this nightmare even happened. How did a nation create such a monster? Stick with me, because it all starts with Japan's wild ambitions. For over 200 years, Japan was like a time capsule, locked away from the world. Under the Tokugawa shoguns, it was all samurai swords, wooden ships, and no outsiders allowed, except on one tiny island near Nagasaki. They called it Sakoku, the closed country, and it kept Japan stuck in the 1600s. But everything changed in 1853 when American Commodore Matthew Perry sailed into Tokyo Bay with his black steaming ships. He demanded Japan open up to trade, and with his cannons pointed at them, Japan had no choice. It was like waking up from a long nap to find the world had passed you by. Japanese leaders didn't waste time. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration kicked off. This was a massive makeover. They ditched the samurai vibe for steam engines, factories, and a modern army. In just a few decades, Japan went from wooden boats to battleships. They proved their strength by beating China in 1894 and then shocking the world by taking down Russia in 1905. These wins put Japan on the map as a global power, and they were hungry for more. They wanted to be the boss of Asia, no matter the cost. While Japan was rising, China was crumbling. European powers like Britain and France carved up China, forcing unfair trade deals and treating the Chinese like second-class citizens in their own land. Japan watched this and swore it had never happened to them. They decided to grab power instead, starting with China's neighbor, Manchuria. By the 1930s, Japan's military was calling the shots, preaching that the Japanese were better than everyone else, especially the Chinese. Loyalty to the emperor was everything. Soldiers and scientists would do anything for him. This blind obedience, called Shudan Shugi, fueled Japan's next move. In 1931, they invaded Manchuria, renaming it Manchukuo and setting up a puppet government. By 1936, they were storming through China, kicking off the Second Sino-Japanese War. Millions died as Japan's army crushed villages and cities. When World War II exploded, Japan teamed up with the Axis powers, Germany and Italy, fighting the Allies across Asia and the Pacific. It was a brutal grab for control, and China became their playground. In the middle of this chaos, Japan built a secret weapon, not a bomb or a tank, but a lab. Near the city of Harbin in northern China, they set up Unit 731 in 1935. On the outside, it looked like a boring water purification plant, but inside, it was a house of horrors, designed to create biological and chemical weapons. Leading it was Shiro Ishii, a doctor with a twisted obsession, turning diseases into tools of war. He wasn't alone. Hundreds of scientists and soldiers joined him, ready to do the unthinkable. But what happened behind those walls was worse than anyone could have guessed. Unit 731 wasn't just about science. It was about cruelty on a scale that's hard to fathom. Who were the people caught in this nightmare, and what did they endure? Let's meet the victims and face the horrors they couldn't escape. Unit 731 wasn't picky about its victims. They grabbed anyone they could. Chinese farmers, Korean workers, Russian soldiers, Mongolian herders, even Allied prisoners like Americans and Australians. These weren't just faceless enemies. They were ordinary people, taken from their homes or battlefields. A young Chinese man named Li, a A farmer with a wife and newborn was one of them. He pleaded with the guards to let his family go, but they just laughed. Like thousands of others, he was hauled to Harbin, never to see his village again. The prisoners weren't only men. Women, kids, even babies were dragged into Unit 731's grip. Pregnant mothers clutched their bellies, hoping to protect their unborn children. But hope didn't last long. The Japanese didn't see them as people. They called them maruta, meaning logs in Japanese, as if they were nothing more than wood to be chopped up. It was a sick way to make the cruelty feel normal, to trick their own minds into thinking these were objects, not humans with families and dreams. The numbers are staggering. At least 3,000 people died inside Unit 731's Harbin fortress. But that's just the start. The lab's germ attacks on Chinese villages, dropping diseases like plague from the sky, may have killed 200,000, maybe even 500,000. Entire towns were wiped out. Bodies left in the streets. No one knows the exact count because the Japanese burned their records. But one thing's clear. Every single prisoner in Unit 731 died. Not one made it out alive. Lee's story shows the terror they faced. Ripped from his village, he was locked in a cramped cell, hearing cries day and night. He didn't know what was coming, but he saw others vanish, taken to labs or firing ranges, never returning. One day, guards strapped him to a table, and his worst fears came true. His story isn't unique. Thousands like him faced the same fate, their lives snuffed out in the name of science. The fear in those cells was just the beginning. Unit 731's experiments weren't about saving lives. They were about breaking them. Prisoners like Lee weren't treated as human. They were test subjects, used to push the limits of pain and death. The labs were where the real nightmares unfolded, places where screams never stopped. What happened to Lee and the others? It's hard to even say out loud. The experiments were so cruel they sound like something from a horror story, but they were real. A Chinese woman, barely 20, begged for her baby's life as doctors prepared to cut her open. A Russian soldier's hands turned black from frostbite, his screams ignored. These weren't just tests, they were torture, planned and precise. The truth about Unit 731's labs is almost too much to bear. Every prisoner faced a death sentence, whether it was a needle, a gas chamber, or a scalpel. The Japanese scientists didn't care about their pain. They wanted results, no matter how many lives it cost. It's a story that makes your stomach turn, but we owe it to the victims to tell it. Let's step inside those labs now, where the air was thick with fear and the experiments were beyond comprehension. What did Unit 731 do to its prisoners? Brace yourself, because the horrors are about to unfold. Inside Unit 731's labs, the air was heavy with fear. Prisoners were strapped to tables, their screams ignored as doctors in masks began their work. One of the worst horrors was cutting people open, alive, with no painkillers. They wanted to see how diseases like plague or cholera attacked organs, believing dead bodies would mess up their results. Men, women, even kids faced this nightmare, their cries bouncing off the cold walls. A Japanese surgeon, shaking during his first try, later confessed, "I sliced a man's chest open." He screamed, his face twisted in agony, but I kept going until he went quiet. This wasn't rare. It was routine. Doctors watched hearts stop and lungs fail, taking notes as if it was just another day. The prisoner's pain didn't matter. Only the data did. It's hard to imagine anything worse, but trust me, it gets darker. Unit 731 turned diseases into weapons. They injected prisoners with deadly germs, bubonic plague, anthrax, syphilis, to study how they spread. Some got shots of infected blood. Others were locked in rooms with fleas or rats carrying plague. One scientist recalled a young Chinese woman begging for her baby as they pumped plague into her veins. She didn't survive. They cut her open while she was still breathing to check her organs. The horror didn't stay in the labs. Unit 731 tested their germs on Chinese villages, dropping flea bombs filled with plague. In 1940, the village of Kuzhou was hit. Over 2,000 people died as the disease tore through. Other towns faced anthrax or cholera with no medicine to fight back. Some say these attacks killed 200,000, maybe more. Entire communities vanished, and the scientists just watched, taking notes. But diseases weren't enough for Unit 731. They pushed human bodies to the limit in ways that sound unreal. In Manchuria's brutal winters, prisoners were tied outside, their hands or feet soaked in water until they froze solid. Guards would tap the limbs with sticks. If they sounded like wood, the tests began. Doctors tried thawing with hot water or flames, or just let the flesh rot to see what happened. happened. One eyewitness described a Russian prisoner whose hands turned black from frostbite. They poured boiling water on them, and the skin peeled away like paper. He screamed until he passed out, but the doctors didn't care. They wanted to know how gangrene worked. It was cruel beyond words. But hold on, because the next tests were like something from a horror film. Unit 731 used prisoners as targets to test weapons. They tied them to stakes on firing ranges, shooting them with pistols, rifles, or grenades. Flamethrowers burned them alive, and nerve gases like mustard gas or phosgene choked them to death. One worker remembered a mother and her little girl in a gas chamber. The mother tried to cover her daughter's face, but both suffocated as scientists timed their deaths. Some soldiers got creative, using prisoners for bayonet practice or showing off their sword skills. Dozens were lined up and beheaded, one by one, just to prove a point. Others had poison gas poured on their skin or forced down their throats. The burns studied like a science project. It was pure brutality, but the next experiments hit even closer to the heart. Women in Unit 731 faced unthinkable horrors. Some were forced to get pregnant so doctors could study how diseases like syphilis affected unborn babies. They wanted to know if the disease passed from mother to child, so they watched pregnancies progress, then cut the fetuses out, often while the mothers were alive. No one was spared, not even the most vulnerable. A chilling confession tells of a pregnant Chinese woman who woke up as doctors cut into her. She pleaded for her unborn child, her voice weak with pain. They gave her more chloroform and kept going, her life slipping away on the table. It's a story that sticks with you, a reminder of how far cruelty can go. But the horrors didn't stop there. Children weren't safe either. Babies, some just days old, were injected with diseases or locked in gas chambers. A Japanese booklet gave sick advice. Stick a needle in a 3-day-old's finger to keep its arms straight for tests. Kids as young as toddlers face the same needles and knives as adults. The scientists didn't flinch. No one, not even an infant, was off limits. These experiments weren't just science. They were torture, planned to cause maximum pain. Some prisoners were put in pressure chambers. The air cranked up until their eyes bulged and their bodies gave out. Others were spun in machines until they died, testing how much the human body could take. It was like a twisted game, and the prisoners always lost. Unit 731 even played with poison. They tested everything. Pufferfish venom, heroin, mustard gas, watching how long it took to kill. Some prisoners were drained of blood just to see what happened. Others starved of water in scorching heat. One test forced horse blood into veins, killing prisoners almost instantly. The scientists scribbled notes, unmoved by the suffering. The experiments kept going, each one more twisted than the last. They exposed prisoners to huge doses of X-rays, waiting for the radiation to destroy them. Some had organs, like livers or stomachs, ripped out while alive, just to see what would happen. Others had arms and legs swapped in pointless surgeries, the doctors curious but heartless. It's hard to wrap your head around this level of evil. Every test ended in death, whether by a scalpel, a germ, or a flame. The scientists didn't care about the screams. They wanted data to make Japan's weapons stronger. But how did the world react when these horrors came to light? The answer is just as shocking. As Japan stared down defeat in 1945, Unit 731's leaders scrambled to hide their crimes. They burned papers, killed the last prisoners, and blew up the Harbin lab, hoping the world would never know. Shiro Ishii, the mastermind, slipped away to Japan, blending into the chaos of a crumbling empire. He thought he'd gotten away clean, but the truth was too big to stay buried. The US caught Ishii, but instead of a trial, they made a deal. In exchange for his research on germs and weapons, Ishii and most of his scientists got a free pass. No jail, no punishment. The Cold War was heating up, and the US wanted Unit 731's data to beat the Soviets in the arms race. It was a choice that put science over justice, leaving victims' families with nothing. Ishii lived out his days in Tokyo, free and comfortable, dying peacefully in 1959. His colleagues went back to normal lives. Some became doctors, professors, even politicians. They held reunions in Japan, laughing over old times while the ghosts of their victims lingered. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing they never faced a courtroom. The Soviets nabbed some Unit 731 members when they swept into northern China. They put them on trial, but the punishments were light. Prison terms, not executions. By the 1950s, most were sent back to Japan, part of a deal to smooth things over with the Soviets. It was another slap in the face to the thousands who suffered and died. Japan stayed quiet about Unit 731 for decades, acting like it never happened. It wasn't until the 1990s that they admitted the lab existed, and even then, they didn't say sorry. No official apology came for China, Korea, or any victims' families. The silence silence kept old wounds open, with no healing in sight. In the 1980s, the truth started leaking out. Workers in Tokyo found jars of human organs and bones, leftovers from Unit 731's experiments. These grim discoveries forced Japan to face its past, but only a little. The evidence was undeniable. Skulls drilled open, limbs preserved in glass, but justice never followed. China and South Korea still feel the pain today. They've asked for apologies, for acknowledgement, but Japan struggles to own up fully. The legacy of Unit 731 is a sore spot, a reminder of a war that left scars across Asia. Families of victims wait, hoping for closure that may never come. The lack of justice stings, but the victims' stories refuse to fade. Their suffering, their courage in the face of horror, demands to be heard. What does their legacy mean for us today? Let's dive into that next, because their voices still echo. The victims of Unit 731 weren't just numbers. They were people, with names, families, and hopes. The Chinese farmer who begged for his wife, the mother shielding her child in a gas chamber, the baby pierced with needles. They all had dreams that were stolen. Their pain is a scar on history, one we can't let fade. We owe it to them to keep their stories alive, to say their lives mattered. In Harbin, where Unit 731's horrors unfolded, a museum now stands. It's a quiet place, filled with photos, letters, and relics that tell the victims' truth. People walk through, reading about the farmer, the mother, the child, and they leave changed. It's not just a building, it's a promise to never forget, to carry their voices forward. What happened at Unit 731 shocked the world so much it helped change the rules. After the war, trials like Nuremberg set new standards, saying no one could experiment on humans like that again. The Nuremberg Code was born, a shield against cruel science. It's because of those victims that we have these protections today, but we can't take them for granted. Could something like Unit 731 happen again? It's a scary thought, but it's possible if we let science run wild without heart. When people stop seeing others as human, when loyalty blinds us to right and wrong, history can repeat. We have to stay sharp, question authority, and put humanity first, or we risk slipping back.